So, retreat is coming to the end, packing our bags, back to our usual environment. Okay? So essentially, what are we speaking about here is how to integrate the intensity of bliss with all the things that bliss bringing to the surface, with the need to still going about our daily business, our daily duties. This is a very, very important theme in itself, very important topic. It's all fun and great to get completely immersed, right, in this, in what we've been immersed now together for a few days. But how do we reconcile all this when we go back to our environment? How do we actually, how can we make sense of all of this? This is a very tender topic and a very tender phase itself. So I thought it would be appropriate if we'll speak about it today, since we still have plenty of hours together for the work we're doing, and still half a day tomorrow. But I want you to also have this realization that you are anchored in your experience, anchored in what is happening in you, to a degree where this absolutely confirmed and very assured sense that the whole point of experiencing this, the whole point of going through all of this, is so that we are able to fuse, bridge, meld, diffuse, whatever other words we may use, the boundaries between that inner state, that raw state at this moment, for many of you it's still very raw, with the necessities that and the demands that life places on us. In other words, it is how to reconcile these very two opposite, if you will, at this moment, very opposite worlds. The inner world of opening up glory, of that realization, very visceral for many of you, very direct, as I said earlier, very raw as well. Raw, and it is beautiful. It is precisely, the beauty here is in its rawness. So what is going to happen when you go back? The first and foremost, you have to understand that it would have to necessarily subside to a degree. It would have to be taken over. In other words, it would not necessarily be as open and as visceral as what you are now experiencing. And that is an important part in itself. It's an important part in itself because this is literally where you are able to test every bit of realization that you've gained here against the demands of a daily life, daily interactions. And daily interactions here, not necessarily with people like here. You've drawn to like each other. You've drawn close together. And it's not that you're going back to some kind of indifferent world. Of course you're going back to your family, to your friends, to your familiar environment. But the opening here may be contrasted by life which seems somehow harsher, more indifferent perhaps, faster, sharper, not necessarily conducive for that state. This is where you need to learn to be gentle with yourself on the inside, and at the same time you need to also be able to have, however gentle yet protective layer, that at this phase you are not being swept away. So in other words, I'm not inviting you to contract, but I'm inviting you to create healthy boundaries which are necessary to protect that sprouted new consciousness that at this stage is still tender, like a bamboo shoot. It's very tender, but if you allow it to grow, as it inevitably will, it will grow into a very strong, very powerful tree. And bamboo is known for that, art of flexibility. It bends with the wind and the hurricane even. It shoots up into the sky. For that reason, it often been served as a metaphor, as a symbol of awakening itself. It's rooted strongly, and the roots go sometimes hundreds of feet from where the plant itself sprouted out at the surface. So at this stage, you just have to be very, very tender with yourself. Allow yourself to do what needs to be done. Implement the methodologies and what you've learned here. Stay in touch together. This is what spiritual family is all about. Sometimes you'd be surprised how hearing from each other, even if it's just a short note, will give that lovely sense of connectedness, understanding. Because you might also, some of you, I'm not saying all of you, some of you will feel as if there is a lack of understanding what you went through. And guess what? It might come from those who are the nearest to us. The profundity of these experiences that most of you now are in the midst, most of you, all of you are, all the field is steered, powerfully steered, enlivened and agitated. And I'm choosing that word carefully, agitated. Agitated at a very subtle level, at a deeper level. In some of you, this process is already in full swing. So interacting in the world might feel somewhat challenging. And those who are nearest to us need to have a degree, I'm saying, a degree of experience of what they are being faced with in order to even able to relate, let alone to understand. I hope you're hearing the difference between the word relating and understanding. You may not understand someone, but at least you are relating to them. These experiences of awakening are very hard to relate unless you yourself are awakened. For that reason, do not spill out too much. No matter how exciting it is to share the news, guess what, just went for 7 days, wow, I'm popped out, you know? And then you will have that cautious look. Darling, let's change the subject. By the way, when last time did you check in for some kind of, maybe you need like, your pulse maybe need to be checked, maybe blood pressure. By the way, have you seen psychiatrists lately? All done in the name of love, of course, in the name of care. Everything is done in the name of love. That's the nature of it. But if there is no understanding, then it could just backfire. That lovely initial impulse may just backfire. Backfire in the sense that it will make us retract. It may make us doubt suddenly. Doubt the sanity of this process. Because we reflect in each other. We literally reflect in each other. If someone doubts us, this is an invitation to be doubted. If someone puts trust into us, it's an invitation to be that trust. Hence, it's not being secretive or holding it all for yourself. And this is, by the way, footnote why I've advised you to put down in few words, even if in few words, in your own journal, because that will somehow express that desire to share what you are going through, and allows somehow to feel a little bit more, like quenching that thirst of maybe in a week's time, in a month's time, I wouldn't even be able to believe whether this has indeed happened to me. The profound nature of spiritual experiences are like that. It could be so profound, and unless it completely opened up the shift in identity to a degree when it is the doubt simply vanishes. The doubt itself is dissolved, completely dissolved. There is always a possibility that we may actually doubt the experience itself. Oh wow, what was that? 7 days. Woo! This is just an overly speaking. And the question is right.
I was going to talk about those of us that have to spend a lot of time on the computer.
Yes, it's a part of it. Very good. You're anticipating then more practical suggestions. Essentially, there is no point to awaken the spirit, no point to awaken the psyche from its slumber, if we are not prepared to do anything to accommodate that process. There's no point, because the house will be shaken. It's already shaken to its foundations, from the foundations themselves. But if we're not prepared to collaborate, if we're not prepared to change anything, if we're not prepared to literally make any alterations in our diet, lifestyle, interactions, and impressions we take in, we might as well playing here a very, very funny game with ourselves. And we will be the only ones to blame. So it's just as plain as that. I'm not going to I'm not going to even try to dress it in any other way. Because psyche dwells in the body. And we have spoken about the body in its all dimensions, in its all dimensionality. Hence, taking care of the first primal seat as the physiology itself is our priority. This is where we have to first of all re-examine the way we eat. Because tell me what you eat and I'll tell you who you are. It's a proverb. Then of course there's an additional one. Tell me, or you are what you eat. There's another take on it. And to take it further, you are what you digest. Because no matter what we eat, it's the quality of our digestion that really matters. It's how this can be digested. We can put the best, the most nourishing food, the most nourishing impressions, but if we don't digest them, very little goodness have been absorbed. So this is what you need to understand. This is what you need to establish. In other words, this is how we begin to implement what we've learned here. So, diet is the first and foremost. Then comes, of course, the mental diet of what we nourish ourselves on that level. So in other words, if we go back to the usual stuff, like bestsellers, some kind of like B movies, what? The news, and yes, everything that is like on the collective, not necessarily vibrating with a higher frequency. We just dispersing that energy, dispersing that momentum, and not necessarily grounding ourselves in where the real grounding takes place. And the real grounding takes place in nature. And this is what is another very important aspect of how to integrate it, is to make sure there is this uninterrupted contact with nature outside of our dwellings. The question of gadgets and technology. You need to take crash course, all of you, to fully understand what it means. Carrying mobile phones in your pockets shut your system down. Your whole electromagnetic field is shut down. You're not even connected to Earth. And yet that's what all of us do. We are kind of thinking, it's okay, it's gonna, it's all right, it's not gonna work. No, it's always at work. Always at work. It's experimentally done. And I always, to impress you, I always say that all those who run these companies, these corporate businesses, the very, very headquarters of these businesses do not carry mobile phones with them because they are in a possession of a greater facts than the public is exposed at the moment. So just bear that in mind. The idea that somehow we are more connected to others when we have a mobile phone is one of the most delusional in nature of our time. Also, many of you are here old enough to remember that mobile phones did not exist. What did we do? Run into the booth and start calling every 5 minutes. Guess what? I'm here on this street, that corner. Sorry I missed you, but I'll leave a message just to let you know I'm here. We constantly want to stay connected. It's an obsession. Recognize it for what it is. Use your mobile phone as an emergency, as a necessity, and leave it, otherwise it's switched off. Pick up the messages, return them. Be sensible about it. At least you'll save a colony of bees from dying. If you don't care for your health, see it that way. So, okay, your job is to sit in front of computer. Another exposure to these waves. And you have to spend a lot of time in front of the computer, as many of us do, as I do myself. So at least break regularly. Break, get up, away from the computer. Wash your face with cold water. Take off the shoes and plant yourself on the organic surface. Wood, tiles, obviously ground, anything that can ground that energy and take away the negative charges. The mother accepts it all. It's so beautiful, as soon as we plant our feet on the ground, how all this goes into the ground. Take showers. You spend a lot of time in front of the computer. Bath with salts, end of the day. And have a glass of water next to you all the time so that you keep hydrating yourself. But do make these breaks regularly, outside. Not make a break by watching something on a computer, because that's how people take breaks of the computer. Working all day on the computer and then taking break watching YouTube videos, and don't even watch my videos. I would prefer you to go outside and spend 5-10 minutes, if you can afford, if you're really running a massive business, and so without you everything will collapse. You can still sneak out 5-10 minutes. Tell them you're going to the loo. Your tummy feels funny. Do that. Do that regularly. Ask yourself, how much time do you really need to work in front of the computer? How much time is it productive and the rest is just waste of time, Facebooking? Tim, you raised your hand. No? No. So essentially this is just some immediate notes of concern, some immediate considerations. And what is more important is that you need to find time to utilize what have been learned here during this week. What have been learned is not on the level of intellectual knowledge. I hope all of you understand that and experience that clearly. So it's to find time in your busy schedule, in your busy life, to introduce those sittings, morning and evening, whenever you can. It has to be part of your life. If you are committed to that work of your self-actualization, that is what it is required. There will be some battle, that inner battle. Oh, but I know I have to pay the bills, you know. Well, one day I do hope there will be understanding that we achieve not from the level of the actual physical action. We only achieve from the level of subtlest intent. When that is understood, we move a lot by moving little. And also sparing ourselves accumulated stress. Accumulating stress is a result always of constantly forcing ourselves somewhere. Constantly, because we feel like if we are to slow down, everything will collapse, because we're all holding the world on our head, on our shoulders. Even if that world is like my family, or if I'll just slow down, everything collapses. If you're not prepared to see this in a new light, then you're wasting a very precious opportunity to understand how nature herself works. And of course there will be these doubts. Just as now I speak, some of you have these doubts. Oh, what does he know? I know better, you know, like, oh, I wish, like we swapped the responsibilities. My life is so much tougher. Guess what? Always when there is my life, it's always tougher. Because it's my life. Someone else's life is always easier. Yet, if I to share with you the bliss and grace and to invoke and to instrument in any way, then it will be selfish of me not to relate to you the most immediate and the most profound realization is that life becomes easier when we learn to trust that everything is achieved without moving a pinky. Everything is achieved from that level. When we see that, when we relax about that, when we allow ourselves to recognize that, something happens on the energetic level. It doesn't mean we don't get out of our bed to do what we need to. Obviously, that is a gross misunderstanding of what is being said here. But that sense of tension simply goes. That sense of unnecessary tension that we need to do, we need to pull this somehow, we need to push it somehow. Unless I push and pull, nothing is going to move. And this what pains me to see is when people who dedicated their life to spiritual unfoldment continuously doing. Because this should be a first understanding. And of course it helps when there's a breakthrough experientially. When you think how just a gentle touch of that intent moves everything. And you become that movement yourself. You are that intent. And you are that action. Where does that take us? That takes us to the core of the teaching. Will, knowledge, and action are the properties of your inner self. Will, knowledge, and action are the very primordial womb of Shakti. Universe herself comes out of there. Millions, billions of universes. And it is that primal source of energy where everything else comes out, in your own being. It's understanding this relationship between will, knowledge, and action, how it is spontaneously translates and manifests through everything we do. These are divine principles we have been speaking about. The most powerful force of creative intelligence is born out of the will, knowledge, and action. And it is carried through absolutely everything. So it is to lean back, literally. Lean back on that and trust into that. And you see the spontaneity, then you can do the activities which felt daunting, which felt like obligations, sometimes like punishment, suddenly become the dance of life. You dance them around instead of pulling them around. So this is how I invite you to implement what you have learned. And then you'll see that the bliss that become evident here as the result of the awakening of that power will never leave you, because it doesn't come and go. It is the core, the basic quality of yourself, the substratum, the very substratum on which experience itself unfolds, without which there is no experience itself. It is that field of being, consciousness, bliss. It is that Satchitananda. So let that sink into you and reach the furthermost corners of your own being. Let that become so self-evident that it need not be even looked for confirmation, because the confirmation is there. We simply need to open up the eye of the inner perception to see it. Is there anything else that feels like being addressed in relation to how to integrate it? And it's okay if you'll say, well, you know what, I'm still in no clue. That's still fine.
That yoga series that we do every morning, that's just that is suffice to wake up the spine to meditate. Just that.
Yeah, this specific set, very short, right, kind of, is actually, if you will, if you notice what is being done, like the spine, the movements of the spine, especially lower back, coccyogenical area, neck, the twist, everything, all deeply interconnected, and literally, these stretches, these yoga asanas have been implemented as indispensable part of some of the major yogic disciplines like Hatha Yoga. And all of them are connected to that gentle, if you will, gentle awakening of that latent energy.
You had said don't get yourself in a rut of doing, any one thing kind of over and over and over if it's not enjoyable. And I was wondering if that was like, is it okay to do that particular
routine, right? That particular routine, you mean? Well, you've done it 5 times a week, right? For instance, and then on the 6th you feel like taking a walk instead. Do that. That's precisely what we did yesterday.
Yeah.
And we'll spend the rest of the day today in individualizing the practices we've learned so as to narrow down what is suitable for each and every one of you and how to implement that. So that I will direct your attention to primal forms of meditation. What is literally will be your range, and will be at least 3 for each of you, at least 3 to choose from. In other words, to play with. And you will become more and more intimate with these practices, more and more familiar. And the depth of that realization will grow. That intimacy of the mantra is a very, very, very important part of it. At first it's just that, and you already felt, many of you felt a sheer charge, a sheer power of certain syllables. And then it becomes intimate. Then the real fun begins. So, this is what is good to, bring our attention, so that you understand also that in my interaction with Lori, that you've witnessed, that contraction and that expansion is part of it. Do not expect yourself, today I'm less blissful than yesterday, something wrong with me, I'm losing it. Just get it now. Just get it now. You cannot lose your bliss. You cannot lose it. You are sitting on it. You are it. It's at the core of your DNA, let alone every cell in your body. It's a comforting realization. And remind yourself sometimes, just like I'm that bliss. My teacher used to say, be happy even if you have to push it slightly. I love that, rather than like dwelling in misery and constantly feeding that misery. You know how often many of us fall into that? Victimization and constant like nostalgia, constantly like... Instead, look at yourself in the mirror. I'm so pretty, I'm so happy, I'm so pretty, I'm so happy.
Have you heard the song, Immortal I Am, Blissful I Am?
No, I haven't.
It's marvelous.
You'll sing it for us later, please. Yeah, I'd love to hear that. So essentially, Satchitananda is the substratum. Being, consciousness, bliss are not indispensable part of consciousness. It's not something that comes and goes. It's not something that we even experience. I'm taking you all the way back. There's no experience outside of the field of Satchitananda. You see, this is where you bring the sweetness of that heart realization with sharpness of understanding, of sharpness of comprehension. We do not negate nothing here. We do not devalue nothing. Everything we can use, everything we can utilize, we do just that. It's not just the path of the heart, path of the mind, It's everything. Everything. And that was succulently expressed yesterday in our morning talk after the walk in the woods. The senses themselves are the sources of reunion, continuous reunion going on. So let that be a reminder to you, and remind it to yourself. You catch yourself, there's a contraction. That's part of it. Wow, I'm so flippin' angry. Wow, and bliss is there. You will learn to recognize bliss beneath every negative or positive experience. It's bliss, That's what it means, the meaning of turning another cheek. Whichever cheek you turn, it's lovely. Just see it for what it is. I invite you to see it for what it is. It's not mood making, it's not becoming a bliss junkie. You cannot become a bliss junkie, you already are. It's like all this amazing, amazing love of this body produces all the drugs that are out there, and those that are not even invented. You have all the ayahuasca and all the LSDs and all the mushrooms and anything already in this body. Charlotte.
Years ago, when Deepak was in the airfield with us, he says, I have one technique that I all want you to use, smile all the time, whether you feel like it or not, because it'll change your whole physiology and you will start to smile all the time.
It's a very good advice. There is like a therapy in Japan when women who, especially very traditional ones that are kind of feel sometimes overwhelmed with all these demands of modern life and yet to still comply with the traditional role of a Japanese woman, they get very stressed and very depressed. So there is this school where they learn to appreciate themselves. It's just like a footnote. So I've seen some footages and it's hilarious because they come in front of a big mirror, all of them, and they stand there in groups facing the mirror as dancers, and they do literally that. They first say, how beautiful, how happy I am, they just like, and they just like, smile, and they do just that. Of course, tears come out, through that. It also prompts some to release tremendous stress. In addition to what Deepak Chopra has said, and not to undermine that, what I would like you to see is the smile beneath even a sad face. In other words, do not deny yourself any expression, because the last thing you want is to force happiness onto yourself. There's a big difference between, even if you have to push it gently, as Maharishi Ji said, and forcing it upon yourself. Because forcing it is making an attitude. And this is a lot of people already do. A lot of people go out and appear as happy. They're buoyant, their body language is like that, they constantly behave and respond to you as if they're happy. But then when they go back to their own dwellings, when they are with themselves, they feel utterly, utterly down. You don't want to do that. Embrace the contraction and the expansion as inseparable part of your own self, because that's what it is. The realization of that spanda, that throb, original throb of consciousness, is to find yourself in the middle, in the midst of that, It's like literally find yourself in the middle of that outer expansion and that inner contraction, which is immediately accompanied by the outer expansion and inner contraction. I meant to say, the inner contraction is always accompanied by the inner expansion, and the outer contraction is always accompanied by the outer expansion. This is why no state meant to be somehow swept under the carpet. Angry or feel fear, you have to go back to what we have spoken about it when we've addressed Kali. Remember? It's to recognize and honor that emotion not as my emotion, but as a universal force, as a manifestation of a universal force, and see what happens. See what happens. Some of you already have seen what happened. Some of you have direct experience, immediate experience of how that fear and how that anger qualitatively transforms us. So in other words, not forcing anything. And this is why those of you who are not laughing when everyone else is in stitches is still in that. And it's just as valuable and it's just as valid. If you're not laughing, then somehow, oh, I'm not releasing. You can release through a very different kind of kriya. You know, you can be in that kriya of being stupefied. There's no emotion in it. So this, I want you to understand, and this is, I welcome you to also experience and implement. So you don't put any impositions on yourself and also some kind of impossible expectations. And yet, I would add that gradually and gently, as there is great elasticity in your nervous system, as this awakening progresses, what you will discover is that that state of bliss simply doesn't go anywhere. It remains there throughout all the three relative states of consciousness. In the waking state, it remains through all the experiences. Doesn't matter how you feel on the level of physiology. Doesn't matter what mood you appear to be in. You are in that state of bliss. So just, I want you to say that, not as a carrot, no. Not as a carrot to reach. You have to be happy in your skin now. You have to accept where you are. But know that this doesn't come and go, so that you also somehow envision that there is this, the dawn, the new dawn that is rising. It's literally when that state of Satchitananda becomes your natural, so natural, it's just so natural that you wouldn't even know you are in it, because you will be just that. And then there will be no way to say how it feels. No way to say, because that what subject and object like, that continuous dance, is simply galloped each other, dissolved in each other. Essentially, the more connected we are to who we are, the more connected we are to the core of ourselves, the more connected we are to the field of energy that empowers everything, the greater there is, obviously, connectivity with the whole universe. So staying connected with others is actually, that is the safest way, the quickest way, the surest way, because it's not dependent on the download or upload speed. It's just, immeasurably fast. And you will also learn, by utilizing some of these tantric methodologies, that some of the mantras can connect you to any being you want, anytime. So just let us embrace a little bit another future as well. Let us imagine a little bit, We cannot just wrap ourselves up in these devices. Sooner or later we will recognize that there is a necessity to recreate organic civilization again. Those who are hip hip hooray in terms of the excitement of that we kind of like going to that we are going to live in this kind of underground or above the ground in some kind of like a satellite-like cities rotating around the earth. It's, you know, that we're going to be, it's just that, balloony ideas that do not have any ground beneath. You know? A walk in the forest refreshes everything and makes everything clear, that much clearer to understand where we came from and what is our duty and responsibility here. So I want us to embrace that and be daring in the way we imagine the future of a human civilization on this planet. Who else is going to do that if we don't? Alleluia.